Okay, we're going to get back in session. Let's see. I have a quorum. We're going. Okay. So the Board of Governors met in closed session, and we have nothing to report. No action was taken. We just heard updates on litigation, but no action was taken that is reportable. I want to do two pieces of housekeeping. On item 3.1, the minimum qualifications for apprenticeship instructor regulations, if I wasn't clear before, I wanted to make sure that folks understood that we had opened a public hearing on that matter, took public testimony. We haven't closed the public hearing. It's still open. So just to be clear, that item was a first reading and public hearing for the proposed regulations, amending the minimum qualification for apprenticeship instructors. If there are any members of the public who would like to comment on that regulation, they could come forward now. The floor remains open for comments from the public. We're hearing no additional public comments. We're going to conclude that hearing. Likewise, on item 3.2, apportionment for non-credit course regulations, again, it was a first reading and a public hearing for the proposed regulations that would allow community college districts to claim apportionment for undocumented students taking non-credit courses. Staff and the Chancellor provided background information on the item. We had some discussion at the board. We did not receive any requests for comment, but again, that public hearing remains open right now. If there are any members of the public who would like to speak on that, please come forward, please submit, or just raise your hand. Okay, hearing no members of the public who would like to speak on that item, we have now closed the hearing on that public hearing. So that concludes the public hearing on both of those matters. We'll be back for a second reading of both of those items at our May meeting and probably have yet another opportunity for public comment. So let's take up item 4.2, the notice of standing order amendments. Our General Counsel, Marc Leforestier, will be reporting on that item. Take it away.
Good afternoon. Marc Leforestier, General Counsel. So I wanted to give just a brief summary of what the standing orders are, in particular for the new board members. The procedures and standing orders of the Board of Governors address a number of subjects, including the board's operating procedures that relate to the board's organization, the election of officers, meetings, and the appointment of subcommittees. Procedures for adopting regulations and recognizing auxiliary organizations, and the standing orders themselves delegate board authority to the Chancellor and his delegates in the Chancellor's office. The standing orders concern subjects such as Chancellor office operations, consultation, contract and grant administration, and a number of other issues. The standing orders were last amended in 2013. The most recent version of the standing orders is available on the board's website. In reviewing the standing orders, it appears that they could use some refreshing to ensure that they have kept pace with changes in the law and that they comport to the board's current operations. I spoke with President Estolano last week and to discuss a process for reviewing the standing orders and presenting amendments to the board. And we intend to work on those changes together with Vice President Epstein and return to the board at a future date to update the standing orders fairly comprehensively. And we would, of course, take those proposals to the Consultation Council. Standing orders currently provide for an amendment process, which is similar to the process for regulations, but contemplates only notice the first time a standing order change is brought to the board. Followed by a consideration of the proposal at a subsequent meeting. And so today we would like to provide notice of one proposed change to the standing orders. And this would be in addition to standing order, the addition of a standing order, which we're numbering 317.5, and I believe it's been distributed to all of the members and is available to the public outside. And the purpose of this amendment is to provide the Office of General Counsel new authority to participate in third-party litigation or regulatory proceedings on the approval of the President of the Board when approval of the full board is impracticable, and provided that the positions taken in such litigation are consistent with existing board policy. So The context in which this has come up since I have, in the short time that I have been the General Counsel, as you know, the board has taken a position in litigation supporting or opposing the rescission of DACA. And we took that position in the case venued in the Northern District of California. There was a separate case that we could have participated in as an amicus venued in New York, but because of the timing of the briefing of that case, we were not able to bring it to the board and be a meaningful participant in that litigation. So that is one example of a circumstance where had we had the authority that we are proposing in this new standing order, I could have consulted with the Chancellor, President of the board, and we could have proceeded to file an amicus brief and be helpful in that litigation. The other situation which the standing order contemplates is in regulatory proceedings. I don't have an example for you today of a regulatory proceeding that we would want to participate in, but I think we could envision that out of the Federal Department of Education, there may be times when we would want to have the voice of the California community colleges heard in a rulemaking or regulatory process. And so the idea again there would be to give flexibility to the General Counsel's office in consultation with the President to participate in such a proceeding, provided it would be in keeping with existing board policy. And again, this authority would only be exercised if there was not an opportunity to come before the board in a regularly noticed hearing. So that's the proposal on the table. The purpose today is just to provide notice of that, and at the May board meeting, we would come back and request approval of the proposal.
Are there any questions from members of the board? I have a question, but I'm going to hold until see if anybody else has any questions. Yes, board member Haynes.
Thank you. So I need you to back up. I'm used to policies and procedures, and they're embedded with the operation of institutions and have a different standing than laws and all of that sort of thing.
Right.
And they come out, but they do come out of, in many cases, new law or existing law or changes in law. So I'm trying to figure out the role of a standing order relative to that. So can you back up and explain?
Yeah. So the Board of Governors has authority that's granted to it by statute and in regulation. The role of a standing order is to delegate the authority of the board to the Chancellor's office to the extent that the standing orders would allow. So that's what the standing orders do. And that can be a delegation of authority in any number of areas. Like one of the most common areas is in contracts and grants administration. Chancellor's office staff performs that work on behalf of the board, subject to the standing orders that are promulgated by the board to direct the staff in how it should do that work.
Thank you.
Board member Haynes, and I'll just refer you to take item 2.1. I think it's important for folks to understand this. These are our rules. These are essentially the rules of how we operate. So in a sense, they are like policies and procedures. So if you looked at today's agenda item 2.1, which is approval of contracts and grants, there's about a 2-page report, and then you'll remember at the end of each one of those is always this standing orders number 318 and all of that. That's the authorization under which we delegate authority to the Chancellor to enter into these contracts. And so it sets forth the limitations of that. One of the things is that the Chancellor shall secure board approval before entering into any contract that's in excess of $100,000 or over 3 years in duration. So those contracts that are coming to us every month to review are those that meet the criteria. They're more than $100,000. They are 3 years in duration or more, or their consulting services in excess of $50,000, and there's a couple of other conditions. So I actually strongly urge you all to go on our website and check out our standing orders. They're pretty extensive, actually. And what they have, though, are standing orders that operate from a different time. So we used to have apparently a legislative committee. There were a number of standing committees, which are not currently operative with this board. So certain items are delegated to standing committees that don't actually operate right now. We could try to reconstitute some of those operating committees or standing committees or not. So the point of Mark taking a look at these standing orders is to make sure that they actually are in accordance with existing law, legislation, as well as regulations. In some cases, they're a little messy. In one example, for you'll hear about when we probably come back to you with these proposed changes, they cite to essentially, it's not the Brown Act, what do you got? It's Bagley-Keene, right? They essentially repeat Bagley-Keene at the time at which that standing order was promulgated. But since that time, Bagley-Keene has been amended. So our standing order is not in accordance, does not completely in accordance with Bagley-Keene. So it'd be better to reference Bagley-Keene as amended and current, right? So it's those kinds of cleanup things that our general counsel has noted as he's taken a look at our standing orders. As a new general counsel, just kind of see where our house is in order and what might need a little fixing. So today, he's proposing and providing notice of this one amendment to the standing orders. And I have some questions about it and some suggestions, Mr. Leforestier. But Mark is also kind of putting you all on notice that he's going through them with the fine-tooth comb, and he's found some issues, and he's going to bring them back to us as a package. I'll be consulting with him on that, but I'd also love help if anybody wants to be, and I'm thinking of Joseph, might want to do this to help me go through these. It's laborious, and it's about detail, but it's important. It's our rules. So if you're interested, all right. I've got my committee of two, or my task group of two. It's not a committee.
I do have a warning, though. You may run into some turgid language if you do so.
That's a guarantee.
Yeah. Okay, Board Member Fahn.
So, yes, I am totally in favor of looking at our rules and regs, and if they're pertinent and they're to ensure that they're up to date with existing overall pictures of things. But on this particular one, if I read this correctly, so absent of a body that or board granting the Chancellor the authority to engage in a lawsuit. So if that's not practical, then the Chancellor would consult with the board president, and then the board president, in this case, would speak for the entire board. Afterwards, I wonder if there are board members who have concern. If they have concern, will there be a time that they can actually discuss this at the next board meeting? And what I'm trying to do, well, what I'm trying to suggest is that I just don't want a decision to be made by the board president and the Chancellor while some members or the majority of the members of the board said, no, I don't think we should do that.
Right.
That's my
So I'm
concern.
going to cut in for a minute because my suggestion, it goes along the lines of yours in a way. So when I read this, I think the intent is when it's not practical to have the Board of Governors as a whole, body of a whole, endorse filing litigation or participating in regulatory proceedings.
Well, I would draw a distinction on filing litigation. So this is not intended to apply, and I don't think as it reads, it does apply to
participating third party.
Where the board is a party.
You're correct.
That's a significant distinction.
Yes.
So this is really where the board would want to participate in litigation more along the lines of expressing policy as an amicus.
Yeah, that's a very important point. So the way that I read this is the Chancellor can go to the President of the Board if it's not practicable to go to the full board because things happen fast and you may have to file an amicus brief in an expedited fashion. But that the Chancellor has to ensure that any position taken is consistent with existing board policies. I would also say positions, because sometimes we take positions, they're not formal policies. And then there's a last paragraph that seems to conflict a little bit with it, because it then says that if there's any participation in a proceeding that is not pursuant to prior Board of Governors authorization, it shall be reported promptly to the Board of Governors and the Consultation Council at a subsequent meeting. I'm more comfortable with the statement that the Chancellor can act with the President of the Board if it's consistent with an existing position. Then at the next regularly scheduled board meeting, you've got to report that out. I don't feel comfortable with the President being authorized to authorize something that is not consistent with the Board of Governors position.
Oh, okay, so that's,
I think it's a drafting issue.
yeah, so the prior authorization that I was referring to here would have been a prior authorization in the form of a public meeting where the board, so if we are not acting under some exigent circumstance, the idea is that we would come to the board and say, we've got time, we want to file an amicus brief. That's the prior authorization that I'm referring to.
Okay.
So in the event that the Chancellor is participating under this new authority, in other words, not under a authority that has previously been granted in a board meeting, then we need to report to the board promptly after we've participated.
Right. I think the Chancellor needs to get authorization from the board. If there's no authorization, if the board hasn't taken a position in a matter,
Right.
then, and there's nothing on record that you can point to, then I think the Chancellor needs to come back to the board.
To get authorization after that. Okay.
Because in the case of the filing of the amicus brief, this board had taken positions. Remember we passed a resolution, folks, around DACA?
Yep.
It was a pretty affirmative resolution, and that would certainly have given you a sense of policy direction that would have enabled you under the rest of this to take a position.
Right.
But if we hadn't done that, I would be uncomfortable with any president authorizing the Chancellor to take a public position on an amicus brief of something of that import without the board having taken some sort of action or made some sort of statement. That is my personal view, and this is something that obviously the whole board would need to amend,
Right.
the standing orders. But that's my personal view, Mark. Board Member Baum.
Yeah, just for some historic or institutional context, in some ways, it had actually worked better to have the Chancellor authorized to take action as opposed to waiting for the whole board to provide the direction in one way or another. I joined the board at a time where the system was ahead of the state on undocumented students, and the board had taken some action and then also took a lot of flack, and a few board members were not confirmed. And so then it was decided at the time, in order for the system to move forward, it was to authorize the Chancellor to act to endorse legislation or things like, and then it would come back to the board eventually, and it provided a level of board review as opposed to prior board authorization that seemed to work and allow the system to act more nimbly when an opportunity arose. And so that's one argument in that. And then if the Chancellor did take an action that we hadn't given prior authority to, we could review and then bring that up with the Chancellor if need be. But it would provide, it gave that extra autonomy to respond on important issues.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, as it regards to legislation, there is that delegated authority now, right?
There is, but there is a committee. So there is contemplated that there would be consultation with the committee, and the committee doesn't currently exist. So that would be one of the provisions that we will be looking at revising in some way.
Yeah, it was my understanding too that we gave the Chancellor the authority. I know there was a time where we had committees, but they never really were fully functional, and so that would be something worth reviewing as well.
Are there other comments or questions or direction?
I guess, Micah, what are we agreeing on?
We haven't agreed on anything yet.
So
We haven't agreed on anything yet.
Yeah,
I threw out my concern, and then Jeff gave us some historical perspective, which kind of counters that. So I think we're not giving our council any direction right now.
So another way to work this is to be clear that this authority to act in the absence of a full public meeting only happens when the action is, we could say, not inconsistent with board policy, although that may be giving us too much leeway. I think, President Estolano, you were thinking about being really only comfortable when there was a clear and express statement of board policy, and then that would be the appropriate time to provide this authority.
Yeah, but I'm really interested in this historical perspective. Yeah.
So I think that's why we have a first reading, to kind of think it through, and I'd like to, especially if we have this construct of committees, and I think for me, it had been helpful if the chancellor at least consults with the board president and then takes the action and then reports back to the board, and then there could be some dialogue afterwards.
Yeah,
So I guess in a broader picture, as you're reviewing all these rules and regs, and I haven't been on the board that long, but if there's a history of committees embedded in our organization at the board level to review certain things, and somehow they evaporated because perhaps members were not willing to partake, or they became inactive. Now we're in different times, and the charge for us moving forward is big. And I don't know if it's, perhaps others could weigh in on this, but we should actually look again at the committee's role and reactivate it, or make our work here a bit more representative rather than just one person, be it the board president working directly with the chancellor, but giving an opportunity for other board members to, whether it's through ad hoc committees or standing committees or what have you. Because I take the vision for success. We broke up into ad hoc, and I think, personally speaking, that lends some credibility, because we have, at least a few of us, looked closely at each of those 5 or 6 items. So I think the usefulness of committees in that regard was helpful for the entire board, and perhaps it could spill into other matters that the board takes. That's just my personal thought.
Board Member Haynes.
So I think this becomes sort of critical. When we have time to do committees and due process, then absolutely building consensus, working out issues. But there are issues that come up that require a response, and we meet every other month. And so, and I think part of this is clear when it says where it is known that or the chancellor shall ensure that any position taken is consistent with existing board policies and positions. That's fairly clear. I think the chancellor understands who his board members are and what positions we've already taken for the record. I think what comes into question when you have to respond, and response is an important one, and the lack of response from one of the largest institutions in the country also sends a message. So for me, it would be taking action, delegating to take an action where it's critical to do so, because he's the guy we hired.
Right.
You're the person we elected to be president. And we've delegated some responsibility in that. And I, for one, say we've got 2 people who will think very seriously about what the implications are and bring our voices into that discussion, even though we might not have taken a position. We can look back and say, yes, you were right to do so, or no, you were wrong to do so, and that's a worthwhile discussion. But to do nothing may be a worse decision because of trying to get to all 17 of us or whatever. Anyway.
Any other comments? Which would argue, Board Member Haynes, to keeping the language as it is. That's essentially what it would enable. It would enable our chancellor to act if there's a quick matter that he needs to do something, whether it's a regulatory proceeding or directing the general counsel to file an amicus brief. Okay.
President Solano, would it address your concern if in the last paragraph we struck the language after the word proceeding, so it reads, any participation in such a proceeding shall be reported promptly to the Board of Governors. So there's no ambiguity injected there into what the authorization means, which I think we have a different interpretation of what was intended there.
I think that would satisfy it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. So
Board Member Anderson.
Madam Chair, quick question. Does this also apply to legislation? For example,
It does not.
we've been talking about the budget, and obviously the Chancellor's voice in this process is going to be very important. Does he have to come back to us?
No, he does not.
He does not. So he can act on his own, independent of the board.
I mean, he reports back. I mean, so this only applies to regulatory and third-party litigation proceedings specifically. In terms of taking position on legislation, that does come to the board eventually, and we're going to see some of that. I think, Laura, you have a report where you're asking our permission to take a position on a couple of pieces of legislation later today. But no, Board Member Anderson, he still has, obviously, the room to act on an expedite. He needs to, right? That's his job, is to work with the legislature. Chancellor Oakley, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Board Member.
Madam President, quick question for you. Could you give me a little bit of historical context on when specially noticed meetings are utilized, and if this could be something that would fall within that purview? I completely understand that amicus briefs need to be filed quickly and efficiently, but what types of situations would be covered under a specially noticed meeting?
Is there a history of calling specially noticed meetings? I mean, I think well, go ahead. Yes.
Say the specially noticed meetings typically have to do with either some disciplinary action, some personnel matter that needs to be dispensed with right away, or some critical action that the board needs to authorize. I think what we're talking about here typically doesn't fall into that realm because we're acting upon previously stated positions of the Board of Governors. It is, we try to avoid emergency notice meetings because we want to ensure that the public always has access to all the deliberations. But we certainly could request an emergency meeting, but the question for the board is whether this would fall into that category of an emergency, and of course make it more difficult for the public to be able to attend those deliberations.
Yeah, and maybe Board Member Baum, I think you're the most senior member now, right?
Yeah, the only time we've done it is in the process of recruiting a chancellor, and we would have, once we had a special meeting in between two meetings to conduct interviews.
Yeah, that's just in my experience, the only time we've ever done a special meeting. Chancellor Oakley, do you want to make any comments on this, where this is headed?
Well, I think this is a good conversation. I mean, from my perspective, I want to be clear that the only actions that we are asking the board that I be allowed to take are those actions that are consistent with board policy or board positions. In this case, with the situation in Washington, D.C., particularly around DACA, and of course, our system has the largest number of DACA students in the nation. We felt we needed to act quickly. And our standing orders made it a little bit more cumbersome and difficult, and that's why the General Counsel has identified this as what we think is a bit of a weakness in our ability to respond. So I am certainly cognizant and sensitive to not acting on your behalf when there is no direction that you've given the Chancellor. What we're simply asking is the ability to react to a situation where we feel that we have clear policy direction. In the case that maybe some may not agree, we would certainly have that opportunity to discuss at a subsequent meeting. But we would take this very seriously and only act on behalf of the board when we feel that it is something that either the board has directly commented on or its policy position is clearly supportive of the action that I would be taking.
Mr. General Counsel, do we need to formally notice that this is a public hearing at this moment?
We don't actually, that is not part of what the standing orders require for this. But in terms of providing adequate notice to the public about what this change is, I think what I would propose we do is we take an amendment to, I think, subdivision C is what you're suggesting, that the Chancellor shall ensure that any policy or position taken as consistent, or sorry, any position taken as consistent with existing policies or positions. And then we would strike the language in the last paragraph that I described earlier. So the sentence would read, any participation in such a proceeding shall be reported promptly to the board. And I'll have that amendment made and copies provided outside should anybody want to take someone home with them.
That's great. Any members of the public, I don't think we have any speaker cards, but if any members of the public would like to comment on this? Okay, seeing none? I think that's it? Yeah.
Yeah, I will circulate it and we'll have copies available for the public for anybody who wants to take them home with them today.
Certainly by tomorrow, right?
Today.
Okay, yeah. Today. Thanks, Board Member Blansky, and thank you for letting me twist your arm on that one. Okay. Okay, now we're going to go to item 4.3, Basic Skills and Student Outcomes Transformation Program. Executive Vice Chancellor Hope.
As our Executive Vice Chancellor gets comfortable in her warm seat, I think particularly for the new board members, over the break I heard a lot of questions related to the direction we're going. And I think this is a great example of an issue that the system has been wrestling with for a number of years. There's been significant investment that the state of California has made to improve basic skills. And so I welcome Executive Vice Chancellor Hope's presentation. I think it's timely, particularly as it relates to the previous conversation we had.
Thank you, Chancellor Oakley. Thank you, President Estolano and members of the board. It's a pleasure to be here today to give you this presentation. At the risk of continuing the turgid joke, I do need to make sure that you know that the acronym for the program that we're going to discuss today is BSSOT, the Basic Skills Student Outcomes Transformation Program Grant. So it's appropriate, I think, that as we've been talking today about shifting values, shifting practices, and really the core of guided pathways being central to our work, what I'm going to talk about with you today is also in that vein. You've all, I think, had some background with guided pathways, and for those of you who are new board members, we're providing some background for you. But one of the things that's central to the success of guided pathways is the reform of basic skills instruction. And so the basic skills grants are really about trying to help colleges activate and enable a lot of the really frontiering work in supporting students who may have gaps in their knowledge when they start with us at the community college. So in lots of ways, the presentation represents that shift from the way things had been done for many decades. Having been someone who was in the classroom teaching English for 20 years, I can tell you that what most students have experienced over the last 30 years is an assessment process that often undervalues their capacity to know, learn, remember, recall a lot of their foundational knowledge from high school. And it isn't uncommon for students to maybe have taken calculus in high school and then place into arithmetic, into a math course. And given that gap, colleges have been wrestling for the last probably 10 years about how to address that issue, that the way that our students enter our institutions isn't necessarily matching the capacity that students have to learn and engage. So the Basic Skills Program was really about trying to help colleges activate some frontiering thinking. And in lots of ways, it's invited us to interrogate ideas about what we think about in terms of student readiness. For many years, I think the history of the community college points to a belief that if students don't assess well, that means that they're starting as underprepared. And that's where the term basic skills often comes from. And I can tell you personally, it's a term that chafes me when I hear us talk about basic skills students. We've already marginalized them before they've even begun. But we've got a lot of faculty and administrators and staff members in the system who've been working hard to try to crack this nut and figure out how we can do things differently. And the basic skills grants, I think, are ways for us to try to address that. So I'm going to give you a little overview as well as a discussion of some of the conclusions that we have thus far. And then we'll talk a little bit about next steps, which also relate to AB 705. So if you take a look at just a little bit of the background, as your board item suggests, the Basic Skills and Student Outcomes Transformation Program began in 2016. And the real core issue here is that the funding was provided to help colleges go through redesign efforts. Over the last decade, we've learned a lot about things that work and things that don't, and so inviting colleges to come up with a combination of practices that are evidence-based to try to improve the progression of students from English and math to transfer level so that they can do that as quickly and efficiently and also maintain the level of rigor that we want to continue to support. One of the things that's worth noting is that the completion rates of students in math and English are so central. It's actually a key performance indicator in guided pathways, that students who are able to finish transfer level English and math within the first year are exponentially more likely to succeed and complete their goals. And so that's why it's such a high value and why so much money and time and energy has been spent at thinking about these issues. So in 2016, we released the request for applications. We got a great amount of interest within the colleges, as I said, because a lot of very entrepreneurial faculty have been thinking about these issues, and colleges have been, I think, experimenting for a long time. There was initially $60 million for the award, and ultimately, 64 colleges were awarded the BSSOT grant because of an additional $30 million that were funded for the Basic Skills Initiative. So that meant, almost half of our system was funded to participate in experimental practices that are evidence-based to try to improve the velocity of students moving through math and English. So when you look at the requirements, I think this is one of the really key elements to examine. You'll look at, when you see these 5 elements, I think there's 7 elements. What colleges need to demonstrate is that they were committing to at least 2 evidence-based interventions. I think one of the things that we have subsequently learned since 2016 is that just because all of these practices are evidence-based doesn't necessarily mean they all have an equal amount of impact. So when we look at the results, which I'm sure you can identify in the board packet, are somewhat mixed. Part of the reason they're mixed is because colleges could pair up any 2 of these 7, right? And since they're not equally impactful, the results also demonstrate that. So you'll see that first one is about adopting placement tests or assessment indicators that are going to include multiple measures and hopefully place students higher. And a number of colleges did engage that kind of a practice. Other colleges place students directly into transfer level, which is part of the focus of AB 705, as you might recall. Others were looking at aligning content with programs of study, which is a key tenet for guided pathways. And looking at the continuing list, contextualizing developmental education with industry clusters and pathways, providing support services. Sometimes you'll see this not only named proactive, intrusive, irresistible, whatever you want to call it, students have to participate is primarily the focus there. Number 6, developing 2 and 3 course sequences as appropriate. And then the last one, implementing other effective practices that needed to be evidence-based. So essentially a college could call out a practice and say, we're going to use this one in addition to one of these other 7. And so because all of these are not equally impactful, and because these were implemented in different levels of scale and different levels of veracity, you'll see some of the results kind of reflect those differences. So let's just take a look at the overview of the progress. We provided the first report, 2016-2017. At that point, most colleges had worked through a number of the planning issues and were at implementation. So the results that you're seeing today really reflect about a year's level of implementation at the local level, really with the idea that this is a more like a 5-year project. So just overall, 60% of the colleges reported a decrease in the overall percentage of entering students placing as underprepared. And I think to a large extent, that's because of this evolutionary understanding that we have about what it means to even say a student is underprepared. One of the things that we've learned is that our students have a lot more capacity than we have given them credit for over time. And that's now starting to be reflected in our teaching and in our practices. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. Looking at English specifically, there was an overall decrease in the number of students who were placed as or designated as underprepared, who subsequently completed a transfer level course. And the same is true for math. That's really at the high level kinds of findings. If you take a look at your report, though, I'm looking specifically at page 82 of your board packet. You see at the bottom there's a cohort summary, which that's what I'm drawing from here. But despite the fact that there were these overall decreases, there were also colleges that experienced increases in the numbers of students who were considered underprepared. And there were also colleges who saw no impact from their practices at all. And that was true not only for assessment and placement, which is what's being reflected here, but also for the numbers of students who went on to complete a transfer level English class, a transfer level math course, or a degree or certificate. So when you take a look at the results, which are kind of broken out more clearly on page 83, you can see that kind of mosaic of findings. And again, just to kind of talk a little bit about those mixed results, the word evidence-based can be widely interpreted. And in this case, colleges looked at all kinds of different practices. So you might have had, for instance, colleges who didn't change their teaching at all, didn't change the course outline of record at all, maybe had tutors in the classroom, and contextualized some sections in their math or their English class, but not all. And so in those cases where the implementation may not have been very deep, or it was a certain combination of factors that weren't as impactful, that's why you're seeing areas where there were sometimes no changes, or even where results went the wrong direction. It certainly wasn't as a result of a lack of effort, or a lack of wanting to make things better for students, or not wanting to try, but the level of experimentation, varies so widely, and so does the college culture in terms of its capacity to even speedily implement a whole-scale change. So that's really what I'm noting here, that the depth of implementation and scale varies by campus. The combination of practices really matters, which is not something we really understood in 2016. I think President Estolano, you referenced Cuyamaca's presentation, and one of the things that we heard very clearly, not only from Cuyamaca, but we had a visit to Mesa College, is that the combination of three things matters most. And that is, one, your assessment placement practices. Number two, that you change the classroom instruction to be more engaging, to be more relevant, to be much more active for the students. And third, high levels of support. So without that kind of secret sauce of those three ingredients, it's hard to get the results that you want to get. And so that's why we see things a little uneven here. And innovation is very culturally bound, by campus. You may have a very entrepreneurial department, but there still may be half of it that really doesn't want to engage. And so in some cases, you saw full departments go head first into an innovative practice, and at other colleges it may have been 3 or 4 teachers, depending on how readily that change was accepted or explored or discussed. So I think that's why you see a lot of these kinds of differences, which kind of leads us to next steps. We will be providing you with a second report in July, just to update you, which will be year 2 into these practices. But we're also sitting on the cusp of AB 705 implementation, which is really calling into question a lot of our previous practices as it relates to assessment and placement, and also supporting students outside of the classroom. And we're also consulting with our practitioner partners who are going to help us with some data definitions. One of the things that we learned from the RFA is there was, at least from the data perspective, a lot of confusion because the words college level and transfer level were used interchangeably, and they're not interchangeable. So we're looking at cleaning up some of that data as we go forward to our next report in July. So we're hoping to have clearer results, and colleges who are participating, we're going to be signaling to them that it's probably a good use of any remaining resources they have to use toward AB 705 implementation. So I'm happy to take any questions or any reflections that you might have about this overview.
Laura, could you clarify the difference between college level and transfer level?
Sure. So for English, college level or what applies to the degree and what's transfer level are the same. That would be English 101 or English 1A, whatever the college decides to call it. It's essentially freshman composition. For the degree, the local degree, the AA degree for math, essentially the requirement is intermediate algebra. But for transfer, the requirement is college algebra or statistics. So when we talk about what's college level and what's transfer level for math, they aren't exactly aligned, where in English they are.
Thank you.
Thank you for prompting that question, Chancellor.
Questions from the board? Yeah, Board Member Avalos.
Thank you for the presentation. So did we look at the data as it relates to the first 43 that were awarded and the other 21 that were added on later?
We have not. I think if I'm understanding the question, it may show itself as something in terms of the level of readiness for
well, there's
the
a
two
reason
groups.
why you selected 43, right? And then there's additional money, and you allocated the other 21. And so to me, you know, I would like to be interested in seeing the 43 in relative to how they performed on their own. Because if you awarded them, there was a reason why, right? And you know, for me as an investor in companies, you know, if I have additional money, I'm going to invest in those organizations that are ready to be invested in, right? So to me, that's where we should be thinking about, not just making it open to everyone because all of a sudden we have extra money.
Right.
Okay.
Good point. Thank you.
At the very end in the summary, it speaks about regional training events. When will that notification come out to the colleges such that they can get teams of people to those training events?
We're on a very tight timeline, as you might guess, with the end of the semester looming large. So one of the things that is imminent is some guidance around AB 705, which will probably be coming out this week, at least as it relates to English. We're tackling math and statistics separately. And I'd like to thank Vice President Epstein and Board Member Pam Haynes for being on that committee and helping to serve in that capacity. There is just a bowl of fish hooks of issues that has to be dealt with, and every time you pull out one, 4 more come with it. So in all likelihood, it'll be late spring that I'm working through the details of 2 events now that we're going to be piloting, probably in Southern California and in the Central Valley, and then we'll have some events over the summer as well.
Board Member Haynes, followed by Board Member Fahn.
Thank you. So you made mention of the 7 elements that colleges will pick 2 of the evidence-based interventions. And I realize that we are quickly moving to AB 705 implementation. But I'm quite interested in finding out of this pool of 64, I think, colleges, which 2 they used, and I'm not certain if you can gather the data, but to what extent the classroom practices changed, and I don't want us to lose this kind of data of what's actually happening and why it's happening and what the implications from the field as they have gone through this process. And then, and so I'm going to say out loud one of the questions. Not that it can necessarily be answered. When we were given the opportunity of ultimately $90 million for basic skills, and then when I read that in these early stages, it's not clear. There were mixed. At every indication, everything is sort of mixed, and I'm sort of wondering why. But to what extent, especially where there were increases relative to unprepared students, to what extent that was because we had these dollars and we felt like we could put more folks into the pipeline versus using other strategies like the multiple measures. If somebody didn't do the multiple measures one, but they used 2 other elements. I'm not certain if we kind of, implicitly, we are making decisions that are not necessarily based on a certain level of criteria. And that's just a question that I had. I don't know that it can be answered, but I think we can answer which 2 of the interventions were used, and then to what extent some of these other elements, did it decrease, did it increase, and the implications for math, which are different implications than it is for English. I'd like to have that data for us to look at.
You've given me some ideas for how we can roll that data out for you in July. I think your question reflects, too, people can use multiple measures, but if they use those high school GPAs to be an additional filter rather than additional includer, right, then that's why you're likely to see the numbers of unprepared students rise. And so one of the things that I can tell you from Cuyamaca was one of the colleges who received these dollars. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I can say about several of them that I'm closely aware of what they were doing, it's not just the initial idea of what they did that's affecting them, but also these shifts in philosophy are also filtering into changes in practice. So even the 2 things that they may have selected in 2016 have now shifted into other practices because of the changes in the field. And it's such an evolutionary time for English and math teachers to be thinking about the work they do and how to maximize those results. I think there are a lot of faculty who engaged in this work initially who are thinking very differently about that work.
I think I have Board Member Fawn followed by Board Member Baum.
Mine is somewhat particular to the collaboration between the K-12 districts and the colleges. And I'm glad to see that you're pushing for more high schools to participate with the colleges with respect to sharing the transcripts for the students, because I think if I recall correctly, at the retreat in Orange County at Santa Ana College, there was a report that we received in that high school transcripts are a good indicator, but many of the high schools are not sharing those transcripts with us. So if we could push along that line to have more transcripts read or utilized in AB 705, given the current legislation. But onto the question of articulation, and you referenced the transfer level and the college level courses. So my understanding is that, for example, at Los Rios District, 300 level courses are transferable. They're college level and they're transferable. But a course that is not at 300 level, let's say the district comes up with a new course and without getting the approval of the CSU per se, that course has to remain at the 200 level or 100 level. And to me, that's a college course and not a transferable course. And I don't know if your office is exploring this with the colleges in the field and in dialogue with the CSU to push that to a level so that it's both college and transferable, because many students in the high school level now will probably say, well, if I can't transfer with that 200 level course, which is a college course, and it meets the requirements and the rigor and all the stuff, why should I take that 200 level course? So that's a question that we as department chair of faculty are kind of, what can be done here? So I don't know if your office at the state chancellor's level could convene a dialogue with the pertinent partners on that particular question.
Well, I think one of the things that's starting to open up is that the CSU, with its most recent executive orders, has opened the door to how we can illustrate quantitative reasoning, for students. I think the UC is still working through a lot of those issues, but I think one of the things that we'll see with AB 705 is even this notion of leveling is going to shift. Because our whole system of basic skills has been built around levels and sequences. And what AB 705 really asks us to do is rethink the way we consider sequences and really invites us to bring most students into transfer level. And the only way that we would do anything less than transfer level is under two conditions. And that is if they were highly unlikely to succeed at the transfer level course, and that taking that lower course would help maximize their success. If those two conditions aren't met, then we cannot place students into a level below transfer. So a lot of the thinking that we have around leveling is likely to change, and I think to the students' benefit, around a belief in their capacity, which we've seen is well researched. It's counterintuitive for many folks because we've been so indoctrinated into this idea that, you know, we have to move through, you know, all these sequences in order for students to have everything that they need to know. But I think we're starting to question how we impart that knowledge and at what rate we can do that, right?
Okay, I've got Board Member Baum, followed by Valansky, and then Anderson.
Thank you for doing this, and thanks to all who have been leading the charge on basic skills for so long. Because I remember there was a time we would even talk about schools offering 4 levels below, and we talk about, and then looking at the metrics on success rates from 4 levels to 3 levels below to 2 levels. So you said something that caught my attention too, again, which was obvious, that there are 3 things that go into success. One is assessment, one is changing the way material is presented. What was the third?
High levels of support.
High levels of support. And so I wanted to zero in on assessment too. Do we have 114 different assessment? How are we doing that? Have we done? So, so that's the challenge. So what's it going to take so that we don't have 114 methods for assessing students, and it's different at each individual campus, when we know that you pointed out there's different results on how students are getting placed based on the data you've provided?
So the AB 705 Implementation Advisory Team, which is a fairly large group of folks, which includes 2 of our board members, as I've mentioned, a number of representatives from the Academic Senate, the RP group, the Chancellor's Office. We've been reviewing the multiple measures assessment and placement data that looks at high school GPA as a predictor. And one of the things that we've seen is a fairly, at least in this initial guidance that I'm putting out with English, a pretty uniform set of standards that we can set up as default placement rules for the colleges that will in all likelihood end up being in our regulatory language. So it's language that you'll be likely to see. But before we go to that step, we are in the process of situating some guidance to the field that says, here's the placement recommendations that we're recommending to you. And the only way that you could challenge those is if you have data that would challenge this data. So it doesn't take the local practice out of hand entirely, but what it does say is you need to have predictive analytics that are at least this good.
That's great.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely, because I anticipate there's some stakeholders within the system that have a stake in the system as it stands, with 114 different measurements, and then placing it. And so we have to kind of get through those or enlist those stakeholders into this process.
Board Member Belansky, followed by Vice President Epstein, and then Board Member Anderson.
I want to make another comment and the possibility of, if not now in the fall, maybe doing some additional kinds of training. But there are colleges within our system that have been doing acceleration for a number of years. And because they're so aggressively interested in this acceleration project and using tutoring with it, they've gotten students quicker through the process, particularly in English. And I think it would be helpful at times to even do some kind of trainings like that, where a college comes and shows you the acceleration process and how they do it, or that the very last paper of the semester is read by a review committee and not just by one person. And the other thing, like in mathematics, is if the student's major is not requiring a lot of math courses, and they're going to therefore take statistics, some colleges have come up with algebra for pre-statistics.
Correct. Yeah, the
And so
way.
I just question how much that information gets out across the state so that people can be shown what some faculty members are doing, and that it's not a trick and a game, but it really is focused on what students need.
I think your point is really well taken. I think one of the things that we have to do, though, is so I have talked with the Academic Senate, with Craig Rutan, who's the president of 5C, the chair of 5C, and asked him to do a survey of practices so that we can kind of see what's going on. But I think it even goes beyond acceleration. Acceleration was kind of that intermediary step between levels and where we are now. Because the idea of acceleration is that you move students more quickly through sequences. What AB 705 seeks to do is blow up the sequence, decimate the sequence. So I think we have to get to a point where colleges can explore different ways of supporting students at the same time that they also embrace new assessment and placement practices.
Yeah, I have a question in the same vein as Member Baum. It's regarding uniformity around practices that work, and we have these 7 criteria, one of which is basically anything that you think works. And it would be interesting to see, of those 7, which ones have proven to be most effective, and then perhaps requiring more than just 2. I mean, I know we've got our 705 thing going on, but is there any consideration being given to that? Do you think that would be more helpful, or would that get a lot of resistance?
Well, I think the colleges who have the funding, they're not going through another round of evaluation. But I would say that from what I know of the colleges who are in that group, many of them have adopted more of these high impact ideas. And AB 705 is essentially going to force that. So at the same time that people are already kind of coming to a shifted mindset around what's effective practice, we've also got the law, which has now also gone into place since this was originally introduced. That's going to accelerate some of that thinking. But I think the idea of going back and looking at the research about which 2 did you start with and how did you adapt over time, sounds like a theme of questioning within the group that I think that we should look further into to be able to report back, just in terms of studying our own story and looking at our own capacity to reform.
From what we've seen already, though, of the 6 separate actions, do we know which ones or which combination of ones appear to be the most effective?
What we know is that there are actually 3, and those are the ones that I mentioned earlier. I think the other problem with some of the criteria is because even though there's a call for multiple measures, there's not a call for how to use those multiple measures. So it's hard to even say that practice is the high impact one because it depends on how it's used. So I'll be able to give you more granular information in July. But I hope that you'll hold on to those kinds of questions so that we can continue to think more thoroughly through them.
Board Member Anderson.
Just his background, trying to understand and get up to speed. So there was 40 something plus, then there was an extra 20 that were added in, so 63, 64. So was that all that applied for the dollars?
No, there was about a dozen colleges who had applied who didn't have the minimum point scale to receive the dollars.
And so why didn't the others go ahead and apply? I mean, based on this program, why wouldn't everybody across the board want a bite at that apple?
So I don't know if it helps at all, but I was at a college that didn't apply. And part of the reason that we didn't apply is because we had so many other things going on. It was just one more task. And it all depends sometimes on the timing of these RFAs. My college, where I was previously, was going through accreditation at the time, and it was just one additional thing that we couldn't fit into the plate. So a lot of times it's timing, it's leadership, it's vision, it's energy. There are a lot of factors that impact this. It's certainly not because there's an unwillingness on the part of the system, I think, to support students at the optimal levels. But I think it's very locally determined based on what's happening on the campus in that time.
And if you were to go ahead and do an overlay there, is there any predicting factors on who applied and who didn't? Is it just because of the fact that an individual was busy with accreditation or something else?
it's really hard to gauge why people apply and why they don't. But I think one of the things that we're moving toward is a less, maybe we'll use the language that came from the slide, a more active, a more inclusive, a more irresistible process of bringing colleges into the process of innovation, rather than just relying on the coalition of the willing. Because, I will echo something that I heard today that I think is, so compelling, and it's what impacts our team. We cannot afford to waste any more students' lives or time. And so the notion that people volunteer to make those choices when they're ready, or if they're not, is something that we have to try to engage and try to encourage as many colleges as possible to engage in this transformative work.
So Executive Vice Chancellor Hope, I love how you ended that, because that goes to kind of the summary I was trying to put together in my head. So the Coalition of the Willing's been great. We've had some successes, but we're just getting some mixed results. It sounds like the best performers are ones who are iterative. They're just figuring it out, and they're changing their plan a little bit, and some are having really great success. We'll know more in July when the second year comes out. Meanwhile, on parallel path, there's AB 705 kind of running down the train, right, the train tracks. They're not completely the same thing, though. It only addresses the front end of it, which is the assessment and the multiple measures. So, and meanwhile, you're going to issue guidance on 705, and eventually that'll become regulation. And then, looming over all of this is this potential funding formula change. Which, if you wanted to transform the Coalition of the Willing to the panicked planning of the all, it would be that.
We've been successful at that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So, so I guess I just wanted to get a sense of how this all aligns. So in July, you're going to have a new report, the second year. I assume that's going to inform some of the guidance on 705, but it's a bigger question than just initial assessment. So it's kind of like, I think, what the Vice President was saying. Can you even just get like notes from the field or something out to the field, even if it's just a short memo, so people can learn from these 64? Mm-hmm. Here's what really, really worked. You've got your 3 points of special sauce, right? Your 3 ingredients of special sauce, but there's probably more nuance. And I just think the reason we do these grants, because we don't have all the money in the world, is partly to lift up the examples of the best performers. So, yeah, I'm hoping that in real time you can get the word out on the ones that did the best, the combinations that really propelled forward, because I think you will get a ready and willing audience, particularly if the governor is successful in injecting some relationship between performance metrics and funding formula. So your work is so important, and I thank you for it. And I know you're running a mile a minute, but thank you for a very clear presentation. So with that, we're going to move on to item 4.4, basic needs support activities, not basic skills. They're different, very different. And we have, I think, Vice Chancellor Rhonda Moore.
I'm sorry, Rhonda had to go to the airport.
Oh, okay.
So you have me instead.
That'll work. I think we can do that. Great.
So I'm going to introduce Colleen Ganley, who's from the Student Services area, who's going to give us an update on the activities. And this report was a request by the Board of Governors, so we wanted to be able to provide you with a little bit of an update about what's happening around activities to support basic needs for students. So I'll introduce Colleen.
Thank you, Laura. Good afternoon, President Estolano, Chancellor Oakley, and members of the board. Thank you for this opportunity. As Laura indicated, my name is Colleen Ganley. I'm a specialist in student services. I work on health, mental health, food, housing, homelessness, and foster youth. So I have lots of hats that I wear. Really happy to be doing that. Across the nation and in California, research is reflecting that students are having a really hard time meeting their basic needs, including accessing food, nutritious food, housing, transportation, childcare, health and mental health services. These are just a few of the non-academic barriers that students are facing as they try to complete their education. So wanting to get a better understanding of the problem, in August of 2016, we conducted an informal basic needs survey. Within 3 days, we had 400 respondents. from over 95 colleges responding. 90% of those respondents agreed that their students were experiencing both housing and food insecurity. Nearly 60% of respondents reported having regular, almost daily contact with students who didn't have enough food or who were at risk of being homeless. In response, we began engaging in activities that would be supportive to all 114 colleges that are trying to support the basic needs of their students. Fortunately for us, the 17-18 state budget included $2.5 million for campus-based food security programs. We allocated those funds to the colleges to do two things. One was to either establish or expand food pantries, and also to provide information to students and ideally support to students who are trying to access CalFresh benefits, which is food stamps. The old term is food stamps for that benefit. A lot of changes have occurred to the CalFresh rules, which really open up eligibility for students, and we really wanted to leverage those changes. To increase readiness, we partnered with 11 colleges, and we did regional CalFresh enrollment trainings. These day-long trainings really walked the faculty and staff through the CalFresh enrollment process, which is very bureaucratic and not particularly student-friendly. We had 82 colleges send people to these trainings, and we trained over 500 people, so there was clearly a big hunger for this kind of information. In April, on the 26th and the 27th, we will be hosting our first ever Basic Needs Summit. We're very excited about that. We'll have workshops and presentations addressing food security, housing, health, mental health services, and general college affordability. In September, we conducted a second system-wide survey requesting information from the colleges about the basic need resources that they have on their campus and in their communities to help their students. And we developed, out of that data, we developed a best practices guide, which was attached to this agenda item. It's currently with our communications department getting finalized and formatted, and so it will be published publicly soon. We recently presented to the Assembly Select Committee, who's evaluating California's master education plan. They're looking specifically to see if the existing master education plan accommodates basic needs for students. We're working with our CSU partners and UC partners on an intersegmental work group. We've also convened our own internal basic needs work group that includes faculty, staff, and students to really try to tackle these issues. The 17-18 budget also included $4.5 million for mental health service grants out to the schools. These funds are designated to increase mental health services for students, to provide faculty, staff, and students with training around suicide prevention and mental health in general. And then also for the campuses to engage with their local community mental health service providers to create referral networks for students who have longer-term mental health needs. We facilitated a competitive request for application. We got 46 districts, and we had 15 awards. Through that process, we did get a few appeals to our intention to award, and so we're working through that process right now. Our goal is hopefully to be able to present the intent to award to you all at the May BOG meeting. That's our goal. A couple other miscellaneous items, and I think some BOG members have asked about some specific things with the Department of Healthcare Services. We are engaged with them to try to support the colleges in their participation in a Medi-Cal reimbursement program that will allow them to bill for their services that they're providing, eligible services. We've just gone into this work with the Department of Healthcare Services, so we'll have to see how that goes. There's some regulatory issues in terms of the colleges being able to bill. We're collaborating with our Health Services Association. My friend Beth here, who is the president of the HSA. We're working on an online education, and also with online education initiative to develop student-facing health, wellness, and basic need training modules in the Canvas platform. So hundreds and hundreds of thousands of students will be able to use this information. It includes things like nutrition, sleep hygiene, mental health, depression, anxiety. There's probably about 25 or 30 subject areas that we're working on building this out. We're working with our local and state food banks to make sure that the colleges are getting low and no-cost food to put in their food pantries. We are supporting the implementation of a bill that passed 2 years ago, Assembly Bill 801, which requires all of the colleges to have a liaison that will support homeless students. And then probably the hardest thing in my bucket is working with the USDA and the Department of Social Services and trying to figure out how to get EBT, electronic benefit transfer, for CalFresh benefits in the cafeterias and the vendors at the colleges. There's a lot of other activities that we're working on, but those were sort of some of the highlights. And I welcome questions.
Thank you, Colleen. Board Member Shaw.
I just want to thank you for everything you've done on this in this subject area. This first came to my attention when I visited Compton College, and the president told me that he thought that 30% of his students were homeless. And so, and after I learned that, I sort of began to delve more into the subject area and attended the conference that CSU put on. I guess it was last year.
I think it was 2 years.
Was it 2 years ago?
Taking us a little while.
Okay. So I'm glad to see that we're on the ball here and we're moving forward. I'm looking forward to attending this summit.
Thank you for agreeing to speak at our event.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Board Member Belansky, followed by Board Member Perry.
I would like to start off also by saying thank you for all of the hard work you do and your willingness to connect with the mental health people at the colleges and provide them as much information and help and assistance as possible. With regard to the AB 801, which requires each college to have a liaison, how will that become known that they in fact have identified?
Well, we, as part of our second survey, we did ask all of the colleges to identify a point of contact that is their homeless student liaison. We currently have a directory of 144 liaisons identified. We also have something comparable for liaisons that support foster youth students from foster care.
And then there was also this thing about the Medi-Cal reimbursement for health and mental health services. Yep. Has that gone forward, or?
You know, we've just really started to engage with the Department of Healthcare Services. Currently, there's a few regulatory issues in terms of the colleges really being able to maximize that resource. The Department of Healthcare Services has expressed willingness to work with us on these regulatory barriers. The question is about the timing and their bureaucratic processes that they need to do in order to change those regulations.
Board Member Perry.
Thank you. I think the ongoing reminder of the populations that we serve and the profound needs that they experience, I think we can't be reminded enough. And this is really helpful. And having said that, I would hope that in the same way, I think the faculty concerns articulated earlier around the new financing, the three-pronged financing program should be baked in. This should be baked in too. A reminder that to build on President Estolano's clever, planning of the panicked. I would say we could call it digestion before matriculation, because it's hard to be thinking about classes when you can't. Your stomach is grumbling and you don't have a roof over your head. So if we could bake that into that thinking, I think that would be really great. Just a question I had, not right now, but later. If you have numbers on the number of foster youth that do avail themselves of the liaisons, I would love to see that. I know those youth are hard to identify within the system because they don't tend to self-identify, but at some juncture, I would love to see those numbers.
Sure.
Thanks.
Vice President Epstein, followed by Board Member DeLilly.
Thanks. The question I have, you talked about the Medi-Cal billing, and something that I've raised around here for a while is getting more students enrolled in Medi-Cal, so that would facilitate the billing a lot more. And it's something that I've encouraged. You know, I've talked to some folks, and we have the technology integration presentation. I hope that is part of it, that they're talking about how to make that part of the enrollment process. But do you know how that's going? I mean, are students being informed when they enroll that, you know, particularly if they're getting in financial aid, that they may be eligible for free health care through Medi-Cal or through the exchange subsidy program?
Yeah, across the system we have 70, 72, it varies, brick and mortar health centers with public health nurses that run those health centers. That's integral to their work. They work with the students to try to get them enrolled in a number of public benefits, but absolutely ACA. It's a harder question to answer where there aren't health centers. I do think financial aid in many instances is supporting students with public benefit access, though I couldn't tell you that the 40 other schools are actively doing that.
I think it varies, pretty widely, how much investment there is in making sure that students get access to that information. And that's actually one of the things that we talk about in student services, is that often the financial aid area is understaffed. Right. And so having, people who are mobilized to make sure that students are aware of all the benefits that they have is one of the big systemic challenges.
Yeah, and it really has to be baked into the enrollment process.
The orientation process.
Yeah, it's...
I think at this summit, I know at this summit, we'll certainly have some workshops and some longer workshops around public benefit access in coordination with financial aid. I think there's never going to be enough money to solve all of these problems, but I think if colleges are willing to institutionalize the public benefits piece to the extent that they can, then more students will access benefits that they're eligible for and they just don't know about them. Thank you. Board Member DeLilly.
Thank you so much for all your work. I can speak for myself and the rest of my colleagues when I say this is absolutely one of our top priorities. So the work that you're doing is amazing for the system. Thank you. If you feel comfortable, would you mind highlighting a couple specific campuses that have had great either food and health and security programs or something to develop in the recent time frame that you could highlight for us?
Santiago Canyon has an incredible health center, since she's sitting in the room. There's a number of colleges who are doing incredible work. Saddleback College does incredible work around Compton. It's a little bit harder if they don't have a health center, because those are the people that I'm most deeply engaged with. But since the food security dollars have gone out, we've seen this incredible wave of food pantries and of CalFresh enrollment. We have 17 colleges that are going to go into a contracting opportunity where they get a third reimbursement for all CalFresh enrollment activities, and that's with Chico State. I mean, we're really, really, really looking all across this space of what's happening for students and how do we get them into benefits, and we're just pulling those opportunities to the colleges. And a researcher said something funny. She said, we discovered student hunger like Christopher Columbus discovered America, right? That it's always been there. But what we do about it now, I feel like, is evolving, and I'm happy to be a part of it.
Board Member Baum.
My question is, again, I agree with what Member Perry said, that if a student's not housed or is hungry, is not going to be a successful student. But then how do we, then I also remember going through a confirmation process and others and being warned against mission creep. And how do we make sure that we're serving as a vehicle to connect students with needed services, but maybe staying a little bit out of the delivery of services to students, because our primary focus still needs to be on the instruction and education of our students.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think probably what we're doing is what we're trying to do is bring the people who are already specialists in these services to the campus to help the students. So, for instance, we're working with the statewide and local level CalFresh people in the counties, and we are inviting those people to our campuses to do CalFresh enrollment clinics. So and I understand very, very much about mission creep, but it's to say we're looking at the experts that are already out there, and we're inviting them to campus to help us with this work. In some instances, that may be getting trained on public benefit access with the goal of having support staff at the campus to do that work. But we certainly aren't ignoring the fact that this does increase workload. I think it's important for the legislature to also understand, with all the things that come down the pipe, that they do take resources. And I think this really is, and you know, my supervisor, Dean Keeley, when she came to our work group meeting and we were talking about what we were doing, she said, this is guided pathways. And so I feel finding a balance and walking the line between those two things, because, you know, I've heard for years about we're not a social service agency, but if the students don't have the things that they need, they're gonna fail out. And we have numbers from Los Angeles Community College District. They did a survey, and they had almost 7,000 students participate in that survey. They had almost a 19% of students who reported being homeless. So I can't pull those two things apart. I have to recognize that a homeless student, I and colleagues all across the state have to recognize that a student who is trying so desperately to break the cycle of poverty is probably going to need a little bit more help in terms of accessing basic need resources. So for me, it's impossible to pull those two things apart. And when we really recognize that these students really, really want to achieve something better for themselves.
Well, and maybe a way too to think about it is that we're providing a lot of times that connection piece.
Right.
You know, and so for a lot of our students, I think the comment about guided pathways is a really appropriate one, because we haven't even had the mechanisms internally to know when students stray off the path.
Right.
And now we've got maybe a more holistic way of looking at why that might happen. And so sometimes we can support that through direct services. Sometimes we need to do that by connecting students to services with whom we interface. Again, that's part of being the community college, is the fact that we connect to the community. And so I totally agree with you. We can't be everything.
Right.
We can't necessarily house students. We can't necessarily do all the things we'd want to, but we can be good partners and good connectors for our students to get them the things that we need.
So first, I want to thank the faculty, the 500 faculty and staff that took time to go to the trainings. They're sort of the first out of the gate to, one, understand who our students are and want to find out the strategies that will help in this area. The other thing I would say, I've had a chance to sit and break bread with homeless and food insecure folks, and had they not told me that, I would not have known. They don't have a sign that says I'm homeless or I'm food insecure. You can't tell them from student A to student B or adult A to adult B what conditions. That's something that has a stigma, one attached to it, and that not everyone is willing to share. And so our strategies really have to sort of recognize that piece and build strategies that build trust, that are not judgmental, and all of those kinds of things. And so I really want to commend the work that's being done, and I would agree on three things. One, that we are connectors, and because we are community colleges, we are about making connections to employers, we're about making connections to homeless shelters. That is some of the work that we historically have done, maybe informally, but the recognition of what we've talked about, which is meeting our students where they are. That's sort of the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so the recognition of that is really important. And then finally, something that you said about breaking the cycle of poverty, that so many of our students are trying really, really hard. And sometimes we don't know it because of the shields that they put up to hide a whole lot of things. But that issue for many of our students is paramount, and they don't necessarily have the skills. They don't always share that. So these are two areas that we can do some work in, and I want to thank you for the work that everyone has begun to do.
Board Member Perry, followed by Board Member Shaw.
Member Haynes made my point essentially more eloquently than I could have, but that's, I respect what you were saying, Member Baum, about mission creep, but I do think what the community colleges provide is in essence sort of a shame-free environment because everyone can applaud the pursuit of education. And if in that pursuit we can recognize other needs and serve as a connecting and a shame-free environment to serve those, I think we'll all be richer for it. So.
Thank you. Board Member Shaw.
And my final comment is I'm wondering if this is an issue that's statewide on every campus. And I'm wondering if our foundation could use this sort of as a subject area where they can raise money. And I wanted to draft Board Member Avalos to lead that effort, since he's the wealthiest one here, to go out. And I think it can happen.
I do just want to go on record that the foundation. Okay, thank you. I wasn't sure if. No. Okay. That the foundation, I worked there for a number of years, and they have been and continue to do fundraising. We just worked with the Kroger company to get a $100,000 grant to do CalFresh, targeted CalFresh outreach to foster youth. So it would be horrible if I did not mention that they do work in this space, and they have for a number of years. And so the more, the merrier.
The more money,
they're amplifying our effort.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ganley. Great presentation. I know the Chancellor has some parting thoughts.
Yes, just to connect this back to the vision for success, clearly, the state of being that our students are in directly impacts their ability to complete a college education. This is not just unique to the California community colleges. This is an epidemic across higher education in general. For us, you will be hearing a lot about resources for our students to be able to cover the cost of college attendance. The cost of college attendance includes food, includes transportation, includes the cost of books. Everything that we can do to lower the cost of attendance directly supports all of these issues. Everything we can do to press the state of California to provide more resources for students directly impacts this. So we have talked about three things over the course of several meetings. In the Vision for Success, we call on a change to the Cal Grant system. Our students deserve more access to Cal Grant. That is the primary mechanism the state of California provides to support California students. It is time that we come together with all of our allies and fight for the resources that our students deserve in the Cal Grant system. So you'll be hearing lots more about that. For new board members, our students access Cal Grant in very, very small numbers as compared to the CSU and UC. And this by no means is a comment that we should take away from CSU and UC, but we should be adding more toward the Cal Grant system. Second thing, when we passed and the governor signed AB 19, the College Promise, California College Promise, it allows community colleges to use the resources available for AB 19 to be used for other purposes other than tuition. So colleges have access to additional resources now to be able to provide support for some of these basic needs. So once the budget is passed, I hope that our colleges look at that as a source. And then finally, getting students into the workforce as quickly as possible is the ultimate key to getting out of poverty. Good paying jobs, preparing students to enter the workforce and ensuring that we are leading them into good paying jobs is critical for us. That is a guiding issue, a guiding principle in the Vision for Success, and we need to put additional emphasis behind ensuring that we do everything possible to provide students skills they need to be able to learn a livable wage. With all that being said, social services are one thing, but a livable wage is a completely different issue. And that's what we need to be aiming for.
Thank you, Chancellor. Okay, we are going to take a little 10-minute break. We'll have everybody back here at 3:15, and then we will power through the rest of the agenda. Thank you, everybody.